spectrometers to get an idea of what's going on Pluto. We can get UV spectra, IR, to determine composition as well as temperatures. High resolution photography, so we've seen pictures from Pluto that are extremely high resolution, so we can get a good detailed picture of the surface as well as get ideas as to what's going on the surface and in the atmosphere. So why do we study Pluto? It turns out that Pluto really is not that boring after all. Originally we thought that it was going to be unexciting. It was going to be pretty boring, a dry, barren place. We couldn't be more wrong. The surface is mostly made of solid nitrogen. And there is a bedrock that was discovered particularly around the heart region over here, where there is water bedrock. Also, understanding what's going on Pluto can be important for understanding what's going on here on Earth. And I'll be talking about that in a few slides. So what I'm doing for my dissertation is something called matrix isolation spectroscopy. I'm not going to bore you with the details. Basically what we're doing is we're putting we're mixing gases together. So my main things that I'm working with right now are acetylene, which is an explosive. Well, kind of explosive. It's very combustible if you get the right conditions. I'm working with argon, nitrogen, and water, among other things as well. So what's going on is inside the cryostat we get near pressure conditions of about 10 to the minus 8 torr. And we want to cool inside of our cryostat, which is basically a tube, to about 6 Kelvin. So those of you who don't know the Kelvin scale, that is freaking cold. So we want to trap our ices in a matrix. So there is a difference between an ice and a matrix. An ice is volatile. So the only difference is that ices are volatile and matrices are inert. So for example, inert gases such as nitrogen and argon would be considered matrices at cold temperatures like 6 Kelvin. And ices would be things like water, acetylene, stuff like that. Some experiments might irradiate samples using things like Tesla coils or UV source, which may cause the formation of radicals, which are things that have an odd number of electrons, basically, in its outer shell. And this models photochemistry of what's going on. So what I'm really interested in is the photochemistry of acetylene. And this is a sample complex IR spectrum. Once again, I'm not going to bore you with the details, but one of the things that I'm really looking at is this little peak right here. So what we see right here is typical, this is acetylene. So this is a stretch that we would see with acetylene. But here, this is what we see when we form an acetylene water complex. Normally when we see complexation, we see very tiny peaks. But as we can see in this peak, we're getting a lot of complex, which is really good. It's not very common that we see something like this. So we are observing quite a bit of the complex. So what my ultimate goal is for my dissertation is synthesis of something called tholins. So I'm trying to determine, along with another PhD student in my research group, how to synthesize things called tholins, which are precursors to something called amino acids. And those of you who have taken a biology class know what amino acids are precursors to also. So this can lead to an idea of astrobiological potential. Could there be life formed in places that we would not normally think life could form? Not on Pluto. Pluto, it's too cold. But other places within the solar system, there is potential for life as well. So basically what I'm doing, we will irradiate acetylene in a nitrogen matrix, and we will eventually form something called cyanocarbene, HCCN, which, if you mix two cyanocarbene molecules together, you will form dicyanoacetylene, C4N2. And if we further irradiate those, we can form multimers of dicyanoacetylene as well as other molecules. And this is a sample of, I'll get out of the way, of a tholin, which once again could potentially form other more other larger molecules that may have biological interest in the formation of life. So that is all that I have for you today. Do we have any questions? Thank you very much.
Woo!